A legacy of dispossession, setting the stage. The year 1788 marked a turning point in the ancient story of Australia. British ships arrived, unfurling the Union Jack on shores that had been home to Aboriginal people for millennia. This was not a peaceful encounter, it was an invasion. The British brought with them a sense of superiority, viewing the Aboriginal people and their rich cultures as primitive. They claimed the land as their own, a doctrine of terra nullius, empty land that ignored the deep connection of my people to this country. This land, our mother, was the foundation of our existence. It held our stories, our laws, our very beings. Yet, in the eyes of the colonizers, we were invisible, irrelevant. The arrival of the British triggered a systematic dispossession, a brutal upending of Aboriginal lives. We were driven from our traditional lands, our sacred sites desecrated, our languages silenced. This was not just an assault on our physical presence, but a calculated attempt to erase our very identity. The decades that followed were marked by violence, disease, and the relentless encroachment of colonial settlement. Aboriginal people fought back, defending their lands and their way of life, but the technological superiority of the British, coupled with their ruthless determination, proved overwhelming. The echoes of this dispossession reverberate to this day, a deep wound in the soul of our nation. The forced removal of Aboriginal children, a practice that reached its peak in the 20th century, was not an isolated event. It was born from this history of colonization, woven into the fabric of a society built on the denial of Aboriginal rights and the desire to erase our presence. It was a calculated strategy designed to eliminate not just a people but a culture, a connection to land and kin that had endured for centuries. The stain of half-caste, a tool for erasure. As the 19th century progressed, a new and insidious concept took root in the colonial psyche, the idea of the half-caste. This term, loaded with the weight of scientific racism, sought to categorize and rank individuals based on their perceived degree of aboriginality. It was a product of the era's obsession with racial purity, fueled by theories of social Darwinism and eugenics. In the eyes of the colonizers, half-caste children represented a problem, a blurring of the lines they sought to draw between black and white. They believed that aboriginality was a taint, a contaminant that could be bred out through assimilation. These children, caught between two worlds, became targets of a policy designed to sever their ties to their Aboriginal heritage. The very notion of half-caste was a tool of division, a way to drive a wedge between Aboriginal families and communities. It was a fiction that ignored the fluidity of identity, the deep connections that bound Aboriginal people together regardless of skin color. This classification was not just a matter of labels, it had profound and devastating consequences. It underpinned the policies of child removal, providing a rationale for the wholesale separation of generations and the attempted destruction of Aboriginal culture. The Aborigines Act, 1905, Legislating Control. In 1905, Western Australia codified racial segregation with the Aborigines Act. This legislation gave the government sweeping authority over Aboriginal lives. It was a framework for dispossession, aiming to eliminate Aboriginal culture. The Act established the Chief Protector of Aborigines with almost absolute power. This individual dictated where people lived, who they married, and if they kept their children. The Aborigines Act was about control, not protection. It was a tool for forced assimilation, a blueprint for cultural genocide. This legislation enshrined the belief that Aboriginal people needed to be controlled by the state. The Act cast a long shadow, creating a legacy of trauma and loss. Section 4, Section 98. The heart of a cruel policy. At the heart of the Aborigines Act 1905 lay a provision that would have a particularly devastating impact on Aboriginal families, Section 98. This section, cold and bureaucratic in its language, granted the Chief Protector of Aborigines the power to remove any Aboriginal child from their family without parental consent or judicial oversight. This power, absolute and unchecked, was a weapon wielded against Aboriginal families. It allowed the government to rip children from their mothers' arms, to tear apart the fabric of Aboriginal society at its most fundamental level. The Chief Protector, acting as a kind of benevolent dictator, became the legal guardian of all Aboriginal children, able to determine their fate with the stroke of a pen. Section 98 was applied with particular ruthlessness to so-called half-caste children. These children, seen as more readily assimilable into white society, were often targeted for removal, their lighter skin a mark of their perceived value to the colonial project. They were to be molded in the image of their oppressors, stripped of their language, their culture, their very identity. This provision, a stain on the conscience of a nation, laid bare the true intent of the Aborigines Act, the eradication of aboriginality itself. The system established by the Aborigines Act was meticulously designed to break the spirit of Aboriginal people. It sought to control every aspect of their lives, from where they could live to whom they could marry. This oppressive regime was not just about physical control, but about psychological domination, aiming to erase Aboriginal culture and identity. Families were torn apart, communities were fractured, and the pain inflicted by these policies echoed through generations. The relentless pressure to conform to an alien way of life left many Aboriginal people feeling lost, their connections to their heritage severed. This system, with its calculated cruelty, left deep scars on the collective psyche of Aboriginal Australia. The focus on half-caste children was a particularly insidious aspect of the Aborigines Act. Authorities believed that these children, being of mixed heritage, could be more easily assimilated into white society. This misguided notion led to the widespread practice of forcibly removing half-caste children from their families. These children were placed in institutions or with white families, where they were often subjected to harsh conditions and forced to abandon their Aboriginal identity. The trauma of these removals was profound, as children were cut off from their roots, their families, and their culture. The policy aimed to create a generation of Aboriginal people who would no longer identify as Aboriginal, thereby erasing the culture from within. The legacies of the Aborigines Act and Section 98 are still felt today. The intergenerational trauma caused by these policies has had lasting effects on Aboriginal communities. Many survivors of the stolen generations, as they are now known, continue to struggle with their identity and the loss of their cultural heritage. The pain of being forcibly removed from their families and the subsequent disconnection from their roots has left deep emotional scars. Efforts to heal and reconcile are ongoing, but the impact of these policies serves as a stark reminder of the injustices faced by Aboriginal people. The resilience and strength of Aboriginal communities in the face of such adversity is a testament to their enduring spirit and determination to preserve their culture and identity.